All right, we are doing this episode 23 of the Guest List podcast. I want to thank my audience members for setting this up. I actually had a listener reach out to me a few weeks back, referring Juliana as the perfect candidate for the show, and I couldn't agree more. She is a fellow entrepreneur in Las Vegas and is the founder and owner of J. Whitney Co. Cannabis business strategy firm. What is that? We're going to find out, as well as who Juliana is. Thank you for coming on to the show today. And how are you doing?
Thank you for having me. I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing excellent. As we were saying before, in these times of down periods, this is the best opportunity to rebrand yourself and to push whatever you want to do going forward, whether it's a business, strategies, and it seems like you've done a few.
I've done a few. It's interesting you say that. Actually, quarantine has really brought that question up. Like, what do I want to do with my life? Or what am I currently doing with my life? Is this what I want to do? You know, quarantine's been trippy in that way. Definitely brought around new things too.
It's exactly how I felt. For the first 3 weeks, I kind of just sat around and I was watching the world burn, even less than it is now. And I was just like, I cannot let myself just feed into this frenzy and just go in a loop. I was like, I have to start something new. And so I was like, all right, this is the best time to do it. Best time.
That's badass.
Thank you. So, as I always start off the shows, we're going to figure out who Juliana is at first. So can you give us a description of who Juliana is and growing up and how you ended up in Vegas?
Oh my gosh, who am I? So esoteric. Such an existential question. I grew up in Blue Diamond, Nevada. I'm just going to mention this because it's a part of my life story over time, but I was adopted when I was a baby in New Mexico by two adorable little professors. They're not going to like that I called them little, but they're cute, and grew up in Blue Diamond, Nevada with them. And it's a tiny little town. Have you been out there?
I have not. I've not been out there yet.
Okay, so 300 people are in this town and some donkeys. And when I was a kid, also there were wild horses out there. And my kindergarten class had 6 people in it. It was just tiny. I grew up out there and, went to elementary school there, I think, till 3rd grade, then went to Vegas and went to elementary school there, then went to England because my mom was teaching in England. So I hopped around to all these different schools. I went to Grant Sawyer Middle School, which was atrocious. Oh my gosh. Grant Sawyer, hands down, made me public school in Vegas, don't do it. No. So I had actually a pretty hard time there, and my parents wound up sending me to private school to Alexander Dawson. Then I went to LVA for theater. Then I read this book called Prep, and it's about a girl that goes to boarding school, but she's not wildly wealthy. She just goes, and it's her whole experience. And I loved the book and just asked my parents if I could go to boarding school, and they humored me. And then I went for senior year, which was a life-changing experience. And that was probably one of the moments, if I look back, that was really brave, that I was I'm just going to change the entire way my life looks. I want to do that. And my parents luckily were okay, sure. Yeah, let's do that. And then the next time I did that, I went to my first year of college at Vassar in New York and did not fit in there. So then left there and then came back to Vegas and then went to UNLV and then got 3 degrees there.
3?
I got 3 degrees. I got 2 undergrad degrees, one in communications and one in sociology, and then freaked out because I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit, but struggled with what I actually wanted to do with it. That was one of the biggest, most difficult things of my life. I always was changing. No, maybe I'll do this. I'll do hotel. No, I'll do a spa. No, I'll do so I couldn't really figure out what I wanted to put that energy into. And when I graduated undergrad, I still didn't know and didn't know what I was going to do, was terrified of having to go get some normal job and start this life I didn't actually have any interest in, you know? So then I got my master's in business as like, I applied and went immediately into my master's. And my dad was their liberal arts professors. So he was not about the business. He is like, business people ruin the world, you know? And I was thinking, have you not listened to me my whole life talk about being in business? I'm surprised that this is a surprise to you. Like, what? And I basically told him, you know, all entrepreneurs learn on, you know, on the ground, like in real life, all those lessons. It wouldn't hurt to learn some of them, some of the technical ones formally, to kind of skip the messy process of learning those ones, and I can messily learn everything else. So then they bought into it, and I did that. And so that's like my school life. Do you want to know about my business part?
Well, we'll touch into a second. Just touching on that idea, I think when you have the entrepreneur spirit, creative flexibility is like the most important thing to have, or else you just feel like you're being suffocated. And the educational system can feel like that at times, because you're always preached on growing up. It's like, what do you want to be? What do you want to be? What do you want to do? But they're asking you at such a young age. You're like, I don't even know what's going to be here tomorrow, let alone 10 or 20 years down the road.
You don't even know how many things there are to be. I don't know. I'm 7. I don't know what they're like, who does what? Like, how would you possibly know? It's a strange question. I always made things up. I was always like, oh.
Yeah, it's exactly similar road. I went to school at UNLV, graduated with a kinesiology degree, and then never ended up using it for anything besides practical everyday use. But yeah. I had realized at a younger age in college, like during my sophomore year, I was like, I'm not using this towards being a physical therapist or anything like that. But, you know, I could use it for everyday use. And and that sounds very similar for sociology and communications. It's every day, especially in business.
Absolutely. Sociology. So when I went to Bachelor, which is a super great school, that's where I realized I liked sociology and like loved the educational part. It was socially, I just wasn't flowing, you know. Then took a year off, and because I thought I wanted to own spas, I got my degree, more like a certificate in so like facials and waxing and stuff like that, you know? So I thought I would use that for a spa or something. And then decided, okay, I'll major in sociology. And then added communications. And I always told people this. I was like, this is for business. As much, you have to understand the whole world, sociology, societies. You have to understand people and communications in order to really do business well in any arena of business. And also to do it woke, but to do it like where you're really good with organizational structure and you have staff that's happy and, you know, you treat people well and you have low turnover rate and all of those things. So I always said, you know, these things do apply to business. No one believed me. I never had someone go, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But just like it's like very applicable. It's just not that linear use of those, you know, modes of education.
Yeah, the path to success is not linear by all means. There's a lot of rock bottoms in there, whether it's a previous rock bottom or a higher one, but there's a ton of low points.
Agreed.
It's so okay, so you graduated with 3 degrees, and then what did you do after that?
So okay, so I started my first company while I was still getting my MBA. And so basically it's just kind of like they meshed together. I started my company at 26 while I was working at a dispensary, and I was taking 2 years off of getting my master's because I had my nonprofit, which I started in 2014. My parents, they were paying for my school and they thought I was too distracted running this nonprofit. So they said, take a couple of years off and get a job. And I wound up in the cannabis industry and I started my company there and then finished out my MBA. And so then, that was only last year. It was like a year ago I finished my MBA.
Was the cannabis industry by accident? Was it just a job that you needed?
It was, so I needed a job, and I mean, I cannot even tell you how to my core, I can't even fathom working for someone and doing it well. And like a lot of people have a hard time understanding that. It's like, oh, well, just kind of suck it up. I'm like, I literally can't. I cannot. It's like I'm allergic, like deathly allergic. I was really being resistant applying for jobs, just like finding random stuff. And as a college graduate, I didn't have the 900 technical skills you needed for like an entry level corporate job, you know? So my friends were opening this first dispensary in Las Vegas and just were like, well, you could work here. And I was like, okay, sure. I had no interest in the industry at all. I knew nothing about it. Don't smoke cannabis at all. Don't consume it. I was just like, whatever, man. I just need a job. So, yeah, I guess you could say by accident. It was just kind of like, here I am. That was the easiest way to get a job at the moment.
What kind of job was it? Was it a front desk job or something in the back end?
Oh yeah, it was patient coordinator, which was essentially it was front desk, and then we'd process all the patient information, which is a lot, especially in the medical. At the beginning of medical, it was like a lot of information, and then would bring them back, a lot of customer service, stuff like that. But really, everyone did everything because it was brand new and no one knew like what was going
on. And this was 2015, correct? Or 16?
It was 2015. Yeah.
It's funny that you said that nobody knows what's going on, because I have a few friends who also work in the cannabis industry, and they also say the same exact thing, that no one has any idea what's going on right now.
Yeah, seriously. That's why I love it. I fell in love with it. Like when I was, because 2015 to 2016, that's not a very long time to be in an industry before launching a company, you know? But I was still asking, you know, figuring out like, what do I want to do with my drive, you know? And a friend of mine who wound up being a business partner later said to me, Juliana, you can do anything that you know, are good at doing or like doing and combine it with cannabis and it can be successful. And I had this consulting / like personal development brand with my friend Liza for like maybe 6 months to a year right prior to this. So I was like, okay, consulting, I like that. And I liked the industry at that point because it's a complete startup industry, especially in Vegas in 2015. And I love startups. I love that mess. I love new ventures. So it wasn't so much the industry as it was the state of the industry. It was so like messy. And I was like, yeah, let's do this. We can optimize this, figure stuff out, like create things, kind of like guide people to guide the industry. I was like this whole vision. And so that's how I started. That was where I got my like real drive to start doing that by 2016.
Yeah. That's cool. That's cool that you have the awareness to do that, because anytime something's new and there's all this chaos, there's so much more room to craft your own niche or even create its own industry within itself, so that you're aware to do that.
Yeah. The chaos is the best. Chaos is where it's like, yeah, magic.
Yeah,
like even you have a podcast out of global chaos.
That's literally the same. My first two guests were nurses. So it's literally feeding into the chaos at first.
Yeah, it's good stuff, man.
Yeah, confusion.
For some people.
I personally thrive on that. I love competition and confusion, and then you're able to just pull it all together.
Oh, same. Yeah, if people feel like everything makes sense and there's rules and there's boxes, and then it's like, well, this is boring, you know, and then everyone's really resistant. But if you just mess everything up and everyone knows they don't know what's going on and they kind of can't cling to anything and say, this is what makes sense, then you can do anything. Like, and it's like no one has even any room to resist because they don't even know what to resist it with.
Yeah,
that's in my mind. That whole sentence made sense. That made sense to me.
That's just like the tech companies of Silicon Valley, where they always say move fast and break things because nobody knows what's broken until it's too late.
Yeah, seriously, it's fun.
So before we dive more into your business, what is this previous business or personal development company that you had?
Okay, so this is actually really fun to talk about because I'm at, which I'll talk to you about this too, but I'm at a point where I kind of want to go in that direction a little bit again. my friend Liza and I are both really into personal development, and we were in the same sorority, but I was not good at being in a sorority, so I left. And we connected a couple of years later, and I don't know, she was just drawn to me. You'd have to ask her, but she was just like, I need to know Juliana. And we decided to start this, it was called JNL Inspire. We never really figured out what it was about, which is why it wound up ending. But we would do motivational Mondays and think tank Thursdays, little videos every week. And I edited them, which eventually I was like, I do not like editing video. Like, I figured it out, but I couldn't stand it. We would do these videos and they actually did kind of well. Now that I look back, I'm like, whoa, they actually did kind of well. And yeah, it would just be, I guess, inspiring and just have fun. My issue then was, I think I was like 25, 26 before I started any company except my nonprofit. And I just felt like I wasn't at a place where I'd actually in real life learned enough to be saying these things and like come from anywhere other than having heard the concepts. I wanted to really internalize those concepts before trying to talk to anyone else about them, you know? But one thing that we did was try to consult, because we were trying to figure out what we even did. And we consulted for My Vegas magazine with their staff and got like $1,000 or something. I think like it was a little contract, but that was the first kind of like business consulting I did.
That's the B2B, which is what your business is pretty much right now. So it's the first step.
Yeah. Yeah, it was good stuff. But Liza would say too, she's like, I believe in us, like JNL will never die. So it's cool.
It's in the heart. I'm curious, what would you describe as personal development? I know it's subjective to multiple people. How would you describe it?
Personal development. I use that term because it's like the term people know. For me, it's really optimization. So anyone who knows me, I'm always like better every day, you know, and it's just optimizing. I'm always about how do I become a better version of whatever it is that I am. So it's finding out more about just life generally, like what are we, and then why are we, and how do you optimize that, and you know, creating your goals and your vision, and then like how do I become the person that can get that, and how do I become the person who's as, you know, mentally stable and emotionally stable and is connected to people. There's like so many different pieces. How do I become all of that and it not be overwhelming, and it be like this ease and flow of being, you know? So it's there's a lot of pieces, but I think it's just optimizing and being, to me, it's like, how do I become a person that if I die in 3 minutes, I'm like, I'm proud of that person. I was the best version that I could have been at that point in my life, and I'm really proud of that. So it's whatever it takes to be that.
I like that. I always pitch that Nike has the best slogan is just do it. And that's the best way to grow, is to put yourself in uncomfortable situations until it eventually becomes comfortable. And then you have to have awareness to step out of it when you're comfortable again.
Totally. And for me, like personal development has branched off so much. So at first, I've been in therapy since I was 12. So that's part of my personal development. And then there's fitness. That's been like a huge journey for me. Especially like dealing with eating when I was younger and like figuring that out, and then figuring out fitness. So it's not an obsession, but you're still doing it well, like finding that balance, you know? And then there's just learning. So philosophies and mindset and things like that, positive quotes, all of that stuff. Then I ventured into a lot of spirituality not at one point, at just a certain point I started to, and now I'm super into that. And then got into like ayahuasca and combo and all these like ceremonies with shamans that you should be doing in the Amazon. So there's a lot.
So did you go down to Peru to try ayahuasca?
No, I want to. I did ayahuasca at an Airbnb in Las Vegas. There's this tribe that travels and does ceremonies. And so pink sharks, I'm telling you, there's something big there. But Sam, one of my pink sharks, I met her the first time I met her before our first wine night. And I said, oh yeah, I've really wanted to do ayahuasca. I hadn't met anyone else who'd actually done it, and she'd done it. And so then for my 30th birthday, she got me a ceremony, and it was here. And so I went to the Airbnb and did it. I would totally do it again. It really kicked my ass. Like, that was a rough one, but I want to do it in like, yeah, Peru or like Costa Rica with a bunch of people I know.
Do you feel that experience set you forward mentally and emotionally?
Yes, in some ways. It showed me I was at a place, like, I didn't do a lot of drugs when I was younger. I don't do a lot of drugs now either. But the reason I didn't do them was because I was kind of scared of that losing, not of like death or anything. It was literally just of like losing that control over yourself, you know? So in one like facet, I got to see, okay, now I trust myself enough to go into this space of my mind without being scared of myself, you know? That was really cool. And then it was also really cool to like the messages that I got. And the shaman, when we started, said, you know, shamans always try to get to a point where you're getting messages and you're not seeing hallucinations as much. And he said, don't hold on to any of your hallucinations. Just like acknowledge them and let them go. And I didn't hallucinate. Like, I literally just didn't hallucinate and sat in the middle with Mother Ayahuasca, where they put all these flowers and like candles, like meditating, feeling like I was filtering the negative energy of all of the people around me and making it into white light. And that was like my primary experience. So that was really cool. And just that, like, this message of lean into your joy, and then it'll be magnetic was basically the message I got. But if you lean into your light, it'll be magnetic. Like, you don't have to push it out to people. Like, they will come to you. They'll see it. So it was, in that way, it was really cool.
I'm glad to hear that. And I'm also really glad that psychedelics have gotten a lot more acceptance worldwide over the years, because there's so many different properties to it that like cure PTSD or anxiety, depression, and set people forward, you know. And a lot of creators attribute their psychedelic experiences towards their successes. So it's really cool. You know, I've done a few psychedelics as well. I've never done ayahuasca. Do want to try it one day down in Peru, the official way.
Yeah, absolutely.
But they're
with mosquito nets.
they're making their way though, and especially in pop culture. I was watching a show called Billions. It's on Showtime. It's like in the 6th season. It's really popular. And one of the episodes, there's a company that's it's called Psychoceuticals. So it's pharmaceutical psychedelics, and it's for psilocybin and for ayahuasca is what they attribute to. So if they're putting that out in TV, you can guarantee that people are probably already investing in it and preparing for it to become legalized down the road, which has already started.
I know. Imagine if I go from cannabis to shrooms.
Mm-hmm. So you could be the psilocybin business strategy consulting firm.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I would love to have just a product, like create a product.
Yeah, I almost guarantee that you will meet people in time that are venturing down that road, because it seemed like a bunch of the alcohol distributors went over to marijuana. Then the marijuanas are going to probably transfer over to psilocybin and the psychoceuticals.
Yeah, a good friend of mine actually, who I think is so cool. I don't think he even knows how cool I think he is, but part of his story is that he did shrooms in a tent in his friend's backyard, and then came up with like his business idea, and now he's retired at 36 years old and is an activist. It's so cool. And he was big in getting psilocybin decriminalized. He's like still working on that a lot, but it's cool.
Yeah. 100%. Actually, one of my friends reached out. He's trying to do that same exact idea in Reno, because it did get decriminalized in, where was it? There was like 2, California, Oakland, Santa Ana, I think, and then somewhere in like Chicago or something like that.
Yeah. Reno. I have a thing for Reno now.
Why?
2 times I've ever done shrooms. Like all my things are vision quests. I have to tell you, I always do them like very ceremonially.
We'll go with it.
Let's roll with that. They've both been in Reno.
Wow.
Because we have a shark casa there. So it's like our, hub.
It's the gathering.
Yeah, it's the gathering.
The sharing. Yeah. I'd say the majority of my psilocybin experiences were in Vegas or at music festivals, which is a whole entire different experience within itself.
I bet.
But the properties of it is something that keeps me back. It's been a long time since I've gone down that road, but I hope that you can add that to your repertoire of your business down the road once it starts becoming decriminalized.
Surely we'll do that.
Okay, cool. So let's go on to your business now, and not the psilocybin aspect, the actual cannabis side of it. What exactly is a cannabis business strategy firm?
That's a great question. I spent a long time trying to figure that out. We help investors to start cannabis businesses, essentially, or to run their businesses better. So in starting them, a big part of that is the licensing. And in a lot of states, it's competitive. So say, Nevada had 65 dispensary licenses, and say 600 people apply, stuff like that. So we help people do that, set up the whole company, hire their people, train their people, come up with the mission, the vision, your culture, all your things, set it up, launch it, and then help to operate over time. I would love to get to a point where we actually manage, like our management firm. For now, our company is not big enough for that at the moment. So we do like operational consulting and strategy over time, but the other thing which I love, that was my first reason for even making the business idea, was optimizing. So just like we were talking about, everything's chaos in a brand new industry. No one knows what's going on, and it's not even completely legal. And it's different in every state, and every city even has different. It's such a mess. My original idea was to be like optimize, like a firm that optimizes these things, figures out the holes, figures out the tripwires, all of these problems. You figure out how to make them efficient and how to help the people that work for you do things well, even in this, environment where they have to be super compliant. If you've just graduated from high school, well, a few years ago, let's say, because you have to be 21, but and you now are working at a dispensary, and now you suddenly have to know like law, the amount of compliance, it's nuts. And the way it was being trained was so crazy. Anyway, so yes, this is where I got my original concept, was to optimize that. So you had then like the best customer service because you trained people well, and because they don't have to face like all the weirdness of compliance, and then you make the most money in this and that, all these things. It didn't work at the beginning. It's picking up now, but at the beginning, no one needed that because licenses are limited. Therefore, you don't have much competition, so you don't need to be that much better. What it needed was licensing. And I said at the beginning, I'm never going to do licensing.
Well, as I was on John Oliver or one of these shows, I saw how tough it was to get a license, and they were saying like a lot of these marijuana corporations just like kind of hoard them, and it makes it really tough.
Yeah, it's really hard. It's really hard, and it's you have to have a lot of money. A lot of money in most states. Nick and I are doing a business. We're launching it soon. And it's essentially, so people pay firms like my firm a lot of money, and my firm isn't even the highest charging firm. And therefore you have to have a lot of money and be like very wealthy groups of investors. And it's funny because on the sociology side, my, social wellness side, I'm not necessarily doing like the greatest benefit by working with the wealthiest people, but I have a business side too. So then what I always think is, and I've known this since I started this company, that it's going to be obsolete. And if not obsolete, it's really only going to be needed by a select few, not a select few businesses. There only need to be a few firms like mine. And I think eventually that licensing piece will become less important as they're not as competitive, and people will mainly use law firms once that kind of changes over, just like people use law firms for gaming licenses and stuff like that. And then I think that like the operational piece that will maintain, because even Macy's uses outside consultants to optimize their operations. That piece will stay, which I'm glad, because I love that piece. The licensing piece, I think, will become, if not completely unnecessary as a service, it will be like so much less necessary. And I think if you know something you have will be obsolete, you may as well be the person or the company that makes it so. So Nick and I are doing a company that will do that, essentially, well, not completely do that, but there's all these documents you need in licensing, like standard operating procedures, plans for everything, your bios, all these different things. It's nuts. It's really like intense. So we're going to sell them. We're going to sell them online. And people will have to put in, like initially with our first version, they'll have to put in regulations and stuff like that, but they'll have all the meat of it, and that is huge. And I'm hoping we'll really change up the game a little bit and let the entrepreneurs have a chance of actually getting into the industry rather than just the corporate boring people from other industries that just transition into this one and then make this really cool industry corporate and boring, which would be such an unfortunate trajectory.
The suits is what ruins everything.
Oh my God. I cannot even tell you. I mean, my clients, I love, and I'm always like, and they're super open too, right? Like they'll say something that's very boring. I'm like, well, why don't we do this? And they're really open to it. And then, which is great. That's a great thing. And that's why I wanted to start the company, because a lot of them are open to it, but they're just not used to it. That's not how their brain works. It's not how they see the world or business, But then there's the ones that it's like, they're doing things that already are so basic because they're going off these like very basic plain business like understandings. It's not fun. It's cannabis. I mean, come on. This used to be breaking the law. It should be fun when you're doing it.
Hey, it's still federally breaking the law.
Yeah, exactly. Like we're a bunch of criminals. We're at least rebels. Like I think it should be at least an industry with rebels in it. And I think entrepreneurs are that. And so it'd be really cool to have more true entrepreneurial spirits in the space to make it more creative. And I'm hoping that leaf sheets that I'm doing with Nick will give more true entrepreneurs a chance at that.
That's
cool.
That's really cool. Well, first, I just also want to say that Nick is on episode 20 that just released actually today of this recording for those that are wondering who Nick is. And he actually did mention leaf sheets, but he said that he was going to let you explain it. So that actually turned out really well.
Great.
That's funny though, because leaf sheets, it's almost like you're aware that a section of your business is going to become obsolete. So you're preparing to overtake that section with something that's going to optimize it. Like training wheels.
I think it's so good if your interest genuinely is not necessarily you and the business you do, but like what it is that the words got weird for me, but what it is you're doing for other people or for other businesses in the world at large. So like I started my firm in order to do this specific thing for businesses in the cannabis industry. And if there's a way for that to be done better or more efficiently or for more people to make the industry better at large, then I should do that. That's like my duty to do that, not to prevent that from happening, because I want my business to stay just as it is, always create and innovate and move forward, and also do the best for the most, I guess, or for the greater. I think in the industry, I think deserves that.
Yeah, your business is basically, it's a moving target where it can change at any second, literally based off of any regulation. What
Exactly.
what would happen if it became federally legal? Would it be just basically more chaos and everyone's racing to do multiple things, or would it be relatively the same?
Um, this is always such a question, and there's some people who will say answers like as if they definitely know what will happen. I don't think anyone ever really knows. What I do know is that even federally legal, the states will still get to choose how their programs go. So there will probably still be some states that don't open up. And the biggest thing, like the biggest benefit would be interstate commerce. So, because right now you can't send things between states, like you have to make everything in every given state. That would kind of be the biggest thing that opens up. I think it's definitely going to kill a lot of the smaller businesses, especially growers, in individual states, because then large grows that are in, anywhere else can do interstate commerce. So those will kind of get squished. Like that small business aspect of it will probably decrease. And then it'll really just be up to how the states run it. Like, what does the licensing look like at that point, and what are the rules in each state, and what does federally legal really mean? Like, how do they model that, and what rules do they put on it at that point? So there's so many unknowns, but it'll definitely lead to larger companies. It'll definitely lead to the death of the smaller ones, unfortunately.
Yeah, so it's good to keep that cap on right now so everyone could catch up, even though there's this main hurdle of getting into it also in the beginning.
Yeah, I get the cap is unfortunate for some people even now because they don't have the funding, but there's kind of a cool aspect of it being, I guess, a mess, like different in every state. And you have to have, that gives this like opportunity for different companies in every state versus one company everywhere. There's a few that have kind of pulled that off and are in every state, but not most.
Huh.
You
Do
know?
you assist in banking services as well? Because I know most of it has to be through cash, correct?
Yeah, I do not.
Okay.
So we have connections that do banking. There's, different methods. I don't do it.
Okay. Yeah, that's where it gets messy. It's where it gets messy.
Talk to these guys. Yeah. Talk to this person about that one. At least help them get the resource they need.
Okay, cool. That's smart. I always say use Bitcoin because then you can just hop around the whole entire thing.
Man. Yeah.
So your business, there's two parts to it so far. Is there another one? You have the beginning, the setup, the chaos, getting through the hurdles. Then you have the like management side. Is there another component to it as well?
Uh, no. I mean, we do it. I do just say it like that it's operations because there's so many pieces. So if I say, well, we also have someone that does branding and marketing, and we have this person, but ultimately it's just like optimizing the way your company operates. Whatever it takes to do that, that's what we do.
Okay,
And that's
that's
it. And then also if you want to get out, we do help people buy and sell just as finders. And that's kind of a new thing because people want to get out. Yeah, finder's fees.
interesting. Yeah, that's just how the world goes around. There's finder's fees for so many different things. Do you deal with CBD too?
We have a couple hemp clients, but that's the only level to which we deal with CBD at all. Um, Hemp is really cool though, because it's
Yeah.
like so much more than CBD. But yeah, the clients we have are doing CBD with them.
There's more products in that whole industry that emerge every day, and it just blows my mind, the different products. I had a friend who runs a CBD company, and he was creating like a syrup CBD that kind of like mimics promethazine, but it's not. So it makes you feel like you're a gangster, I guess. I don't know. There's so many psychological like aspects to it as well.
That's interesting. That's
Yeah,
a really interesting product.
yeah, it's
After
innovation.
people come up with like people, this is one of my favorite things about this industry. People do things that don't make any sense at all. Like that if you were to do them in any other line of business, everyone would be like, that's nuts. Like, that's not even a feasible business concept, or that product, like on an actual business basis, what you're doing makes no sense. But people will try to pull it off in this industry. And I love it because I get to watch it. I'm just like, what are you doing? I think one guy wanted to do a cannabis village in Nipton, and he bought the entire town. He got investors, bought this entire town. I went out there. I toured it. There was a whole concept. And I was just like, maybe I'm wrong, but there's so many ways that this makes no sense. But I'm going to watch this. Let's just see. Well, what happened was it fell apart before it even started because it doesn't make any sense. But I love watching to be like, well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm totally wrong, and something that sounds freaking nuts is going to just hit it, you know?
That's in any emerging industry, there's always like a massive overcorrection where they just want to take that idea and throw it into practically anything that exists and see if there's a combination towards it.
Yeah, which is like so inspiring in a way, you know? And then in another way, it's like, did you even think that through, or you just had that idea and like just ran with it? No questions asked. But I love too that there's investors that invest in these things. That's my favorite thing. Like, people think that investors, especially initial investors, go completely off logic, but it's shown that they go wildly off of emotion. So because they're the most risk-taking of investors are your initial, you know? So if you can have a really like heartfelt or very inspiring story about a business, you could get some of those emo investors to give you some money. It's pretty cool.
That's what VCs are for, right? They invest in 100 companies hoping that 2 or 3 hit like that 500x mark, and then it's well worth it.
Yeah, totally.
Does your business tie VCs to product startups?
Mm-mm.
No, separate field.
We've been asked about. So we don't do that right now, only because the clients we work with are super well funded.
Okay.
So that's why. That's the basic reason why we don't do that.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand more properties in this chaos. To me, your business, it's like the perfect like middle entity. Like there's like so many, because you're aware that it needs to evolve over time as well, and so you probably get so many different ideas shot at you, and then you reconsider it.
Totally. Like even the helping businesses find investors, that was, I almost want to flip that and help investors find companies that are worth investing in, you know, because as a company, we have to make money. So if we're working with companies that have no money, we would be working on contingency a lot, you know, which, not to say there's not something to that. But I think that really connecting with a bunch of companies that need those investors would be awesome, in the name of finding the investors and helping them find the best companies to invest in, you know, because there's many a mistake made by many an investor in this industry.
Yeah, we're working on contingency it's fun when you're an entrepreneur because it's a wild emotional ride, but it's not exactly the right business move if you're trying to survive and grow.
Yeah, and it's like, if you love that, if I loved doing that, I'd work on contingency all day, but I'm not so passionate about it, about, you know, helping those companies find investors, that I would do it all on contingency.
What is your opinion on marijuana lounges that may open up out here? Have you dove into any of that or been around any of that scene?
Yeah. One of my good friends, Scott, was really big on the lobbying side of really getting that going. And it tripped up a bit, you know, got put on hold for a couple years. I'm excited to see how it goes. I don't have a really, so on one end, I think it's cool because it gives people a public place to, or like a place outside of home, or, you know, private property to consume cannabis. However, once you're allowed to consume cannabis anywhere, like whenever that happens, then those lounges, I believe, will need to, and this was part of the model, like part of the model was to have beer and wine too, because just having cannabis consumption wouldn't necessarily make that much sense, right? Like I would drink 10 vodka sodas. Okay, not 10, but let's say you drink 10 vodka sodas while they're out at a bar and you lose your inhibitions. So you start making worse decisions, such as spending more money. Cannabis doesn't necessarily have the same effect. Like there's so many people that can just like smoke a little bit and you're chilling for hours, like hours, and just chilling, and you don't really lose your inhibitions. You're just chilling. So like on a profit making basis, having a lounge that only is there for cannabis consumption is an interesting concept. But we'll definitely like fold in probably alcohol and food and stuff like that. But I know the model here that they were originally going to do just really didn't make sense, because it was like you could have a lounge or even just like a yoga studio or something. And the yoga studio thing makes sense. The lounge thing, the license would only let you allow people to consume there. So you couldn't actually sell cannabis. You could just let people consume it there. It wasn't necessarily like having a whole new brand new business. It was like, okay, you can start a bar and your bar is allowed to have people who smoke cannabis there. Like you're not allowed to sell it. And so it was just like a bizarre thing. It wasn't really this like new business model where you can sell weed at like a lounge, you know?
And interesting. If they were allowed to sell weed, then they would have to charge like $50 for a J or $100 just to like make up that difference.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting. It'll be super interesting to see.
Yeah, I like that. I work at a nightclub, and this is something that we discuss within like the coworkers all the time, is if weed will ever make it to the strip. And you know, it was the exact same idea that you had, that when people smoke, they're not spending money. So I don't think the alcohol companies will let that happen, even though I know that they do own part of the marijuana companies as well.
Yeah. So gaming, I think it'll really be the gaming control board. And I don't know that they'll ever let it be there, but if they do, yeah, it'll be interesting to see if he doesn't want it, other than saying, yeah, people can consume it while they're here. Outside of that, like we'll see, you know, like who knows? Like we won't find people if they smoke it here. Like maybe that's the extent, but
yeah, there needs to be a lot more clarity on it too, because we get tourists all the time who come in and they're like, I thought it's legal, I could smoke here. And like, there's too many different dividing lines between the legislation and ideas. And, you know, maybe you're just like looking away to pretend that it's not happening because it is legal, and you don't know. It's chaos.
yeah, isn't it fun? It's like, wait, you can buy this, you can have it, you can consume it, but just not in these places. Like, consume it here. Like it's like what? Like so confusing. I don't know.
Do you have a forecast? Do you have a forecast on maybe where the industry might be headed over the next few years?
Oh my God. I used to. So it's definitely consolidating. There's way bigger companies. They're buying up smaller companies, or they're winning all the licenses in the states. Sorry, my screen's being weird. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can still hear you.
Okay. I was like, so bigger companies are buying up smaller companies. There'll be a lot of consolidation. I think there's going to be large companies that tank. So, which has already kind of started happening. Either they've tanked or they've had to like scale down immensely. That will happen for sure. Those two things are the two things I'm most confident in. I think, so one thing I'm big on is the general consumer, like the person who's not a medical patient or who's not a high dose cannabis consumer, you know, like not a lifetime, not even a lifestyle user. It's not like part of their identity. What do those people consume? How do they consume it? What does it look like? That's really being developed a lot. I think that'll continue to develop. And I really think that that will be the predominant products, because there's so many more people who might consume 5 milligrams, 2 milligrams of THC just to kind of chill out almost, you know, than there are that will smoke a whole like pre-roll or eat 100 milligrams of THC, you know? So I'm excited to see those products. I'm really behind those products. I'd love to create some of those products, like actually functional things. I think that's a big thing, is things that have not just to say, okay, this will make you feel this way or this will make you feel that way, but okay, who is it that consumes this? The everyday consumer that has a 2 milligram mint, but you know, and they're stressed out a little bit, or like when they're at work. Not to say I'm saying you should, but sometimes you should. Or like women products. There's been a couple shots taken at creating female-based products. I think that's huge because, however, a lot of them have, like, there's men involved in trying to make them. Whoopi and Maya had their line, but that tanked. So there's these things tank, you know, it's fascinating. But I, with one of my business partners, definitely have a concept for this female product, like slow release. That's huge because Advil. So, you know, we don't all get cramps, but a lot of women get cramps every single month for like a few days to a week. And Advil is not good for you. One day I was just like, how much Advil have I taken in my life? It is like, it eats your stomach line. Like, it's not good for you. So if there's a really solid CBD, THC, I don't know, you can put in some lavender in there, whatever works, like product made that's natural and helpful and you feel good. It helps with your weird PMS mood swings, like helps with your cramps, you're chilling. So like functional products. That's what I'm seeing, is like things being refined down to being more useful. Not just completely recreational or like high dose medical, but like actually like daily useful.
Yeah.
And enjoyable.
Yeah, the research that goes into all of these, and I watched a documentary on cannabis a few months ago, and they're talking about all these different cannabinoidal strains that they keep discovering, and yet they don't know exactly what the specific use is, but I think there's like 6 or 7 now that they've discovered, and there's plenty more that go around.
It's wild. The plant has so much going on with it. We have no idea. It's funny that it has so much going on with it, and it's widely known as this like very like, you know, kind of dopey low grade thing, but it's actually quite like a complex, really interesting plant and then also product.
Yeah, very, very complex. And some of the doses that I've seen at the dispensaries, it just keeps getting stronger and stronger. And I think that's where you're talking about the non-practicality of some of these marijuana plants. It's just like trying to just juice it up. It's like marijuana on steroids. And you're just like, you can maybe take a hit of this before you're on the ground. Like, this is not practical at all.
And I think that I don't like that I'm saying I think, because anytime you say something, clearly you think it because you're saying it. Okay. I just had to point that out. I've said it so many times and I just needed to identify it. There's going to be a transition, or probably currently there is a transition, where it's uncomfortable to lead in a certain direction. So there's products, THC sells, and that's why these companies are amping up the THC, because it sells. Milligrams of THC per dollar is like a thing. But there's this whole consumer base that, like I was just talking about, that would even be like me and most of my friends, that we just like 5 milligrams, we're chilling, like hanging out, you know, even just to get through the day or to go on a run or like all of these things. That's a concept that's been around, but to transition into leading that takes a lot of marketing. It takes a lot of marketing because you have to reach those people and then convince them that it's okay, or just show them. I don't want to say convince them, but show them that it's okay, make them feel like, okay, more open to it and really understand what the product is. And then they start using it. So there's something that has to like get to the tipping point where, okay, now those products are where the bank's at. It's not there yet. So a lot of the companies aren't trying to be the ones that get it there. I'm sure they'll jump on once it's there. So they're just still amping up the milligrams of THC per dollar.
Yeah, that's literally what I was just going to say, is that's probably the most profitability is in these higher potencies.
Yeah, totally. Which I don't get, because I'm not fun if I have too much THC. I'm not a fun time.
I'm the same. I become antisocial and I call myself useless. That's why when I haven't smoked in a long time, but I would always be like that midnight toker where I just want to relax because I can't do anything. I can barely even read a book.
Right. Yeah. You're just chilling. Like I'll go on a run or something, 5 milligrams, I'll go running. But if I smoke a bunch, I'm like going to sleep or I'm super anxious. So
yeah, it's good too that it's starting to drift away from that negative stigma that so many people had around, because I've seen a lot more elderly people start getting into it, and now that it's been legalized, and it's interesting to see where it'll be in 10 years, because that generation, they won't know what illegal marijuana is.
How crazy is that going to be? They're going to be like, that's so weird that a plant was illegal.
Yeah, like, you're telling us.
Yeah, you're telling us. It's cool too because it's like, I don't know, there's so much cool stuff about like, this is why I like the strategy piece of all of it, because that's what I'm into. Like there's all these complexities. What do we do with them? Like, what do we do with them? And one of them is that THC, or just like the combination of your cannabinoids and your terpenes, all the different percentages makes each product have a different effect. It could be the same strain, but if the percentages vary, you can even have a whole different effect, even though it's like called the same thing. Well, then and then it affects like each individual differently. So like I have 5 milligrams, I could have the same effect from 5 that someone has from 100. That is such a thing to figure out, because I mean, there's people with different, I hate to like equate it to alcohol, but it's the easiest to do so. And so there's people with higher drinking tolerances, but it's not that different. It's not like for every 1 shot I have, you could have 20. There's no one that actually exists. Like that difference does not exist with alcohol, but with like cannabis products, it does. And so that's going to be so fun to figure out, because it's like, how do you make it a consumer thing when it means every consumer has to be more aware of their own bodies and like their own intake? And how do you get them to do that? That's hard.
Yeah, you're going to see some sort of medical advancement as far as the technology and rating systems, and who knows, all these different implications that go into it.
It's exciting.
Yeah, I am excited for that. I'm excited to see how you grow, and I'm also very interested. I don't know how to transition to it, but I'm just gonna ask about that adopted girl. Yeah, your nonprofit organization. I'm very interested on.
Okay, that adopted girl, I haven't done much with in like a year, but I'm going to. But I started it in 2014, and I started it because I'm adopted. And I had been through, by that point, like 16 years of therapy, and had all these understandings about what it means to be an adopted person, and really wanted to write a book about it. And to write the book, I decided first I should do a blog. So I had a blog called That Adopted Girl. And I got a lot of response, way more traction than I would have imagined. Like, it was really interesting. I didn't realize there's not really that many people on that topic speaking, I guess, from my perspective of like the child, you know? So because that did well, I suddenly felt like I needed to make a nonprofit organization because of the messages I got from the blog. It was like a lot of very painful messages. Like, people really had a hard time as kids in foster care or as being adopted out of foster care. I was never in foster care, but I had this feeling of as though I was really only like one step away from being there, I guess. Like if one little thing had gone different in my story, I would have been that child too, and in that trajectory of what it means to be, you know, a foster kid or an adopted kid. So I started the nonprofit to help those people, and I figured, okay, I'll do the book later, and essentially started working especially with girls in foster care ages 12 to 18, because 12 is when I lost my shit. Like that's when like everything, that is when being an adopted kid was a thing for me. Like I was like, I gotta know about it. I just went nuts, like off the deep end for a minute. And it really kind of continued for like time. On some level, it was always there for like a decade at least. So 12 is when I was like, okay, we got to get them at 12 to 18 because they age out at 18. And then the biggest issue I had with that adopted girl, I always had #worthy tribe, because my biggest issue was self-worth. And people will say, okay, a lot of girls have issues with self-worth. I know, I get that. A lot of teenagers have issues. I get that. Yes, I know. But mine were in some ways very specifically tied to have been given, like being given up by the people that birthed you gives you a specific kind of self-worth issue. So I did these events for these girls, and luckily had a bunch of like friends and connections that would help out too, and businesses in the community, that these events were based around self-worth. And my concept was to plant seeds in their head that like, you know, here's a life that you may not have seen, but you're worthy of. You know, here's experiences you may not have had, but you're worthy of these. So even if they never see them again, they know that it's something they can have. And yeah, so my concept was to plant seeds, and we did cool events. Like we did a self-love Valentine's Day event where we had a big Italian dinner, and we did a presentation, and we danced, and we had all these cupcakes. We had this one for I don't even know. I just called it sweet, and it was like self-worth something tea. I don't know. We did, that was the coolest event, because we did, I think we started out with a MAC makeup artist coming and doing makeovers, and he brought gift bags for all of them. So they all had this like really great, like, I was like, I want that gift bag. I didn't get one, but, but they all got them. And then we did this exercise called the shadow box, where you talk about like what you keep inside and what people see outside. So then that kind of gets you talking about who you are, you know. We took them to a show, I think Jeff Civilico, and took them to dinner, and then took them to JM Hair Gallery where they did all their hair. And it was just this like really cool day. So we would do stuff like that.
Wow.
It was awesome. And then we would do gifts and things. One year we did 500 Easter baskets. Not pre-made. We made 500 Easter baskets. And I think I got interviewed on the news like 2 to 4 times. And so people were just bringing stuff by. And Craig P. Kenny let us use his space in his office to like put these together. The community's so cool about it.
Wow. So you did this 6 years ago, and this was your first, I wouldn't call it a business, but your like first endeavor that you pursued?
It was my first endeavor that I pursued. And part of what people were like, how come your first thing is a nonprofit? And I was like, listen, most people work in their corporate jobs, and then they have an identity crisis, and they realize they want to give back, and then they're 50 something or 60 something, and then suddenly they're really charitable. Like, I'm going to start with the charity piece from the get-go, because what I always say is help a lot of people make a lot of money. Those are really my two things. If you make the goals simple, that's what they are. And so that adopted girl, yeah, gave me that.
Yeah, and this is something that you have personal experience with. So there's passion, there's awareness, there's all these different concepts within it that you've experienced. So you know how to handle when different adopted kids approach you about it.
Yes, I actually, Jake, I gotta say, I think that I need to do more with it. And it was like a bigger calling than I, at the time, like at the beginning, really had like the resources or knowledge to put into it. And kind of having space now, I see more like actually how valuable, and I don't know why, but for whatever reason, the adoption story I was given, but not just that, also the resources I was given to understand it, like so much therapy. I can't tell you how much therapy I've had. So much buckets. And my parents were always really communicative about it. And I've met both my birth parents. So I've had all these ways to kind of dissect like the adoption and then what it meant for me and over time, and having that viewpoint. And I only say this because there's so many other people who are adopted and they're 30, like they're my age or older, and they've never thought about it. They don't want to think about it, and they haven't tried to analyze it, and they don't connect any, like I, for whatever reason, was like, I've got to know everything. Like, I need to understand this whole thing and how it's affecting me and what it means and like all these things, I think for whatever reason I did that. And I think that see, I said, I think for whatever reason I did that, and that knowledge is more valuable than I've given it credit for, is what I've been shown in a lot of instances. So I'm definitely going to do more with it. But yes, for now, it's that adopted girl. Everyone support foster kids.
It's very important to dive into your past and kind of understand what makes you you. That's something that I always preach on, is that somebody's backstory is just as, if not more important than their mission statement going forward, because those are different things that drive you. And especially all the different obstacles that you've had to overcome from there.
Yeah, I completely agree. I drive people crazy sometimes. Well, one, anytime I meet someone for the first time, like, I'm like, what was your mom like? Are your parents still together? Do you have siblings? Like, just all these questions. And I always, when I'm talking to friends too, I'll tie stuff back. Like, oh, do you think you acted that way with that on that date or with that guy you're dating because of your dynamic with your mom? Like, I'll do that all the time, but it ties together so much. And to some people, it's like, oh, you're overanalyzing, you're trying to understand or over-understand things, or you're connecting too much to the story. But I think there's so much freedom in understanding all the little things that are actually impacting the way you behave, because then you know why, then you can work on it. If you don't know why, you're just letting all this stuff impact you every day without you having any knowledge.
It's that basic nature versus nurture debate, and the majority of it is actually nurture. It's how you grow up, your environment, and being adopted. There's so many different conflicting ideas from what you see out in reality with everyone that's like with their biological parents, and I'm not sure what your relationship was with the biological parents, but it creates a lot of confusion, and your self-identity, it sounds like, it becomes diminished, and you almost have this existential crisis at a young age, which should not happen.
Yeah, it's seriously, I could go on about it for way too long, but I think one of the key things that I take away from it is that it's actually a really big traumatizing experience for a child to be separated from their parents, from like their birth parents, but it's like at whatever age, that's very traumatizing. And it's not really acknowledged. It's kind of like, okay, here, now you have new parents. It's fine. Like, but it's not fine. And then there's these kids like, okay, now I feel guilty if I'm not fine because I have parents and I love them, but also I did experience this like trauma and deep heartbreak, but I'm not allowed to. And then that makes a weird like emotional and identity kind of dynamic. And then also like if you even feel like you're allowed to talk about it and heal from it. So then you wind up with a lot of kids that never heal for that reason.
So that's so unfortunate.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Do you think self-identity is the toughest component to being adopted?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think yeah. It's a big, if anything I've heard from any adopted kid, it's that. Because even if you just have the concept in your mind that you were given up by this person, let's say the concept of unconditional love. If there's anyone in the world who's supposed to unconditionally love you, it's like the woman who births you, you know? So then what's your understanding of love? And you kind of have to maybe change that from what society talks about it as. And then of yourself too, because who do you identify with? You know, you can look at your mom or your dad usually and see parts of them and you and them, and that helps you integrate like what everything means. But you lose that as an adopted kid, and so maybe you have some similar like characteristics or behaviors that you learned from your parents, but there's so much that's different. Usually, I think in some scenarios somehow they wind up very similar, but when there's so much that's different and you feel so misunderstood on a level that's just like, you know, like my parents, I did things that they were mind blown and had never seen, could not understand. And it's like, I can't explain it because I'm a kid. So it was like this huge disconnect. And so then rather than having parents who are like, oh, I saw that, I did that, or my sibling did that, or I've seen this before, I know what to do. They're like, what the heck is this? Like, they can't even, like, what do you do? You know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
there's, it's a lot.
Yeah, I was gonna say they don't know how to how do I want to put this? They don't know how to put themselves in your shoes because they haven't gone through that experience, and it's such a unique concept. Well, not adoption is a unique concept, but it's rare among the masses, and so there's not like a go-to outlet for the parents to go and be like, how do I treat this specific situation, because they're all exactly different experiences.
Yeah, they're different in these. Yeah. And now there's websites and stuff. And one of them, America Adopts, they had me write for them a few times. The last time I fell through, I feel so bad about it. But there definitely are websites that are trying to become resources for these parents. But like I said, the thing missing though is the voice of the child, because that's who you really need to be asking. But these parents can't ask their children because they're still children, which is where I think myself and people like me would be really valuable to adoptive parents. And not like, hey, this is what it's like on their side, you know?
Yeah, it's, to me, it just seems crazy that the voice of the children is something that's lacking, because you'd think that more people would speak up, but there's so many different barriers to that, as one is literally being a child to be able to do that. And then a lot of people, once you get past that age, you don't want to go back and re-experience that situation because of the trauma that's tied to it.
Yeah, that's a huge piece. And a huge piece is the want to say, well, I have my parents and I love them, so all of that doesn't matter. That's like the biggest response I've gotten. And I'm like, yeah, I love my parents too, but I think this still matters.
Yeah, it's very, especially in times now where there's so much communication out there, it's important to have your voice heard to the ones who don't know how to articulate those emotions that are wrapped up in those weird times for them.
Totally. You're so understanding.
I try to. Everyone has such a unique experience, and not one life is ever the same, and everyone has a different idea of maybe similar experiences, but completely different outcomes towards the end. And so I think it's important to dive into that and to really understand like what makes a person think the way that they do. I'm similar to your philosophy, like very similar.
Cool.
And I think your story is very unique, because you also had said that you did the whole business thing backwards, where you started the nonprofit first and then you went into the capital side. So, but I think that I think that'll set you up perfectly for the future, because now that your business is growing and you're controlling somewhat of the chaos, and
in it. I'm partaking in the chaos. Totally.
It's interesting. I think just from this conversation that we've had, it's like you there's the identity crisis is growing up, being like an adopted child. And then you went into personal growth and development, which is probably tied to that experience, and you wanted to grow. And then you took that personal development and turned it into understanding sociology school. And now you took that personal development, and now it's just development of different businesses with strategy. So it's cool to see how it evolves.
I've never had someone say it back to me like that before. That's true.
It's yeah, piecing it all together. I'm a very big proponent of what's called skill stacking, and my audience is probably annoyed with me saying this because I say it all the time whenever I notice it. But it's basically you go through all these different experiences, whether it's for profit, not personal tragedies, and you take the silver linings out of all these different things that have happened, and then you make it so niche to you that you end up creating something that nobody else could. And so yeah, that's kind of the main idea, and that's literally what I saw from your story.
Wow. That's really cool. Skill stacking.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear. It's actually an idea, a concept that's brought by Scott Adams. He wrote the comic strip Dilbert, and also a philosopher. I know you said that philosophy is important to you now, and that's kind of where you're going. You should look up a guy named Naval Ravikant. He's a popular modern day philosopher who ties a lot of those different experiences as well.
Cool.
Yeah.
I will look him up.
Like I said, yeah, I'm always open, and I think that your story, like I said, it's very fascinating, very amazing. I'm excited to watch all of this chaos. And before we go, I always end with two questions. Okay. Same questions to everybody. The first one is: the year is 2030. What does the life of Juliana Whitney look like?
The life of Juliana Whitney looks joyful and connected, got a lot of good people around me, and I've got a beautiful home and a really badass car. It's probably electric.
Tesla life, yes.
Yeah. Traveling and experiencing abundance that I've created by improving the lives of other people. Yeah, I really want to go that like more story-based, inspirational, like development route. So that having really worked out for me. You know?
I enjoy that. When I ask that question, I usually ask like what your business is in 10 years. But since you've already acknowledged that business may or may not exist and transform into something else, I had to pertain it to yourself because that's how entrepreneurs work.
Yes, that's what it would look like.
And last question is, what does Las Vegas mean to you?
Las Vegas means, what does it mean to me? Well, Las Vegas is home for sure, but in this cool way that it's this weird little town that has international notoriety, but is like somehow still a small pond and gives all this opportunity when you're an entrepreneur starting, you know? So in that way, I just find it just really special. And I think I'll always look at it as like a blessing of a place to get started. It gives you opportunity to be bigger earlier than you probably would be some other places.
Boom. Put the stamp on it. Vegas is the easiest way to make money really fast, and you could go do it and then branch out and create what other business you want. And that's why I enjoy Vegas so much. People put a lot of emphasis on the negativity surrounding the education system, but what they don't realize is that it breeds entrepreneurs all day with the amount of money that is generated in this small, finite amount of time.
Definitely.
So where can everybody get connected with you?
On Instagram at the J Whitney, and on my website if you want to look at the company, which is jwhitneyco.com.
Cool. All right. I'll be sure to attach those in the show notes as well. I thank you. Go on.
Wait. And can look up That Adopted Girl on Facebook. Also J Whitney Co on Facebook. But That Adopted Girl for sure.
Yes, it's a Facebook page.
Yeah.
All right. I will attach that as well.
Cool.
Juliana, I thank you for this conversation. It was very inspirational, to say the least.
Thank you. I hope it was. I'm like, I don't know what I even said, but it was like useful. Words definitely came out of my mouth.
You think, right?
I think it did.
Oh man, this was amazing. Thank you, and thank all the listeners for listening. I'll catch you next time.